Welcome everyone to Mastering the Bain interview. So we're going to give you a bit of insight into the Bain interview process, and so you can see a little bit of about how a Bain case typically looks. Not always, but typically. Depends on the round, depends on who's interviewing you, but we'll do our best to simulate the type of thing you might see. I'll give a really quick intro. So I'm Jeremy. As Alyssa said, we were both Bainies, so I was a Bainey in both Dallas and Boston, and I was at the company for 4 years with a 2-year break for my MBA at MIT. I left 3 years ago, but before I left, I was very heavily involved in the recruiting and the interview process that Bain does for AC and ACI roles, which are their undergrad roles. And so I'm very familiar with what's being looked for. Um, and so I joined Leland 3 years ago and have been coaching on here very consistently since. I do a lot of events, and I think some of you have seen me. I think someone commented in the chat. Thank you for being here again. And I coach one-on-one as well. So that's a little bit about me.
And I am Alyssa, also from Bain. I spent all my time in the New York office. Similar to Jeremy, I joined right out of undergrad, took a 2-year break to go to business school at Wharton, and was back after. Stayed until manager and left late last year. Since then, I've been doing freelance consulting and case prep as well. And really also very familiar with the interview process, did my fair share of interviews and super days, and like really love helping people one-on-one kind of get better at the case, feel more familiar with the behavioral and all the aspects around everything consulting, case interview, or just interview related. So we're going to do a kind of a shorter case since we have limited time, but it should be fairly representative of what you might see in a Bain first round. We'll have Jeremy tackle the prompt, set up the framework, and I'm going to try and take notes live just so that it's easier to follow along. And we're gonna stop kind of in between each section, and we can, when I can give a little bit of feedback and kind of comment on what Jeremy did well, just so that you know what we're looking for. And so it's sort of a start, stop thing so that you can kind of follow along, and hopefully that's really helpful for kind of seeing what good looks like. Hey, Jeremy, thank you for joining us today. Our case is on sports apparel. So we have a private equity client, and they're considering investing in sports gear, which is a sports accessories and apparel manufacturer. However, the sports apparel market growth has been slowing in recent years. Gear management is projecting high growth rates based on the expected apparel sales growth only, not including their accessories business. So you've been hired to help your client analyze the potential deal and make a recommendation on whether or not they should invest.
Client here. Well, thank you for this awesome prompt. I love sports myself, so this should be an interesting one. Sports gear is, or rather, our private equity client is considering acquiring or investing in sports gear, and they want to know if this is a good investment. This company, Sports Gear, makes apparel and accessories, and it sounds like they're expecting growth based on just this apparel business at the moment. And so I just want to clarify I heard that correctly, and our main goal here is to figure out if an investment from our private equity client makes sense or not.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, just writing that down. Is it okay if I ask a couple questions before I structure this one out?
Sure.
Okay, so I know I heard a bit about the company here. They make
Yeah.
apparel and they make accessories. Do we have any information on A, if they make anything else, and B, if they would just like to focus on the growth of this apparel business and evaluating the opportunity today?
Yeah, so they make accessories, but we can focus on the apparel
Okay.
aspect of it.
Okay. Awesome. And is the client geographically, are they located in the US or are they a global, not the client, the target? Is the target in the US or is it global or somewhere else?
They are based in the US.
Okay. With sales in the US only?
That's correct.
Okay. Awesome. So in deciding whether or not they should invest in this company, are there any specific goals as to what that investment would achieve? Now, I know most of the time investing, the goal is to make money, but I'm wondering if there are any other goals, like gaining more share in a specific market or anything like that.
No specific goal.
Okay. Okay. So I'll take it that making money is probably something, the most important thing, but that they're open to other things as well.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. I think I have everything I need to think through an approach. Do you mind if I take a couple minutes to do that?
No, go for it.
All right. Thank you. Okay. I think I've got a good way of thinking through this one.
Great.
Okay. So I want to, in understanding whether or not this is a good company for our client to invest in, or whether or not sports gear is a good company for a client to invest in, I want to look across four different things that will help them make that decision. The first thing I want to understand is the sports apparel market in general. Uh, the second thing I want to understand is uh, whether or not this is an appealing target when we start to look at them at a deeper level on some different, uh, across some different contexts. I want to understand if with this, once we make the acquisition, if we can create value and actually increase the value of it while we're holding it. And then number four, I want to understand if there are attractive exit opportunities at the end of the investment life waiting for us. So let's go back to the first one, understanding the sports apparel market. The reason this is important is because, from what I understand, the majority of the client's business is in this sports apparel market. And if this is not a good market, if it's not an attractive market, the investment itself probably makes little sense. So let's start with this market. I think there are three main things that would help me understand if this is attractive. Number one is if the sports apparel market in the US specifically is healthy and growing and large to begin with. If this is a large market with healthy growth, it's more likely the type of market that we're going to want to play in. And things that might be making it large and growing are if lots of um, people are buying, sports apparel products like jerseys and pennies and all these other things you use to play sports. Number two, I'd want to understand the competition that exists in this market, specifically if there are other players making sports gear as well, or if there are lots of companies making adjacent products that people choose over sports gear. Understanding who the main players are, if they're major players or smaller players, can just give me a really good sense on if it's the type of market that we might be able to further win in or not. And then finally, the market positioning of our client. It would be good to understand how the shares of all of the companies break down in the market and understand if we're positioned as maybe a leader or one of the smaller players compared to everyone else out there. So once I've got a good understanding of the market, I'd want to go deeper on the actual target company itself. Uh, Even if the market's attractive, if we look at the company, it's a total mess. We wouldn't want to invest. So that's why this one's really, really important. Number one, the finances, understanding if it's healthy financially, what it's sort of done over the last, let's say 5 to 10 years, but more importantly, the last few and the most recent one. If it's not healthy financially, it's probably not healthy in a lot of other ways. So that's where I'd begin, understanding profit, the ways they make money, things like that. Number two, I'd want to understand operationally. Are they run smoothly? Are the operations sound? Is there a lot of uh, are there a lot of kinks in the way they do things that might get in the way of just a smooth running company? So, for example, it would be good to understand operationally, like where they source things from, if their suppliers deliver on time, if things are in their factories run smoothly, if they can get orders out on time, or if maybe they're late fulfilling orders and all sorts of things like that. I'd want to understand leadership if they have a good team in place, and then I'd also want to understand their strategy and how they think about growing. That's my second category. And then the third thing I want to explore is if we can actually create value and make this company better over time. This is a little bit harder, but it will rely a bit more on the private equity firm. Do we have the right expertise in this industry so that we can actually be additive and add value to a company that we're acquiring? Um, and I would want to understand things like if we have other companies in our portfolio that might have synergies with this company that can be sort of accretive over time and create value where maybe another private equity firm that acquired the same company wouldn't be able to. And then finally, my fourth category, I want to understand how we might be planning to exit this opportunity or this investment, because I know for private equity type investments, investors are looking for a return in typically like 3 to 5 years, sometimes a little bit more. So understanding what sort of money we can get for this at the end of the life, and also how long we're expecting to hold that investment, um, will be critical, of course, in seeing if this is a good path for us to go down. So I know that was a lot, all of that being said, the first thing I'd love to explore is whether or not this sports apparel market is actually a good one for us to be entering or not. So do we happen to have any information on either the size of it or the growth or any other indications of whether it's an attractive market?
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, we'll take a break from the interviewing for a bit just to give quick feedback. I hope you all agree that Jeremy did a fantastic job. That was a really comprehensive framework, but this, as you can see, it the way he has structured it's logical, it makes sense, but it's not a canned framework. Because a lot of the times when it comes to like profitability, immediately candidates will say, okay, revenues and costs, and like it's correct, but everyone else is going to say that, and you're not really able to differentiate yourself fully by doing that. So you always want to try and customize your framework as much as possible to the context of the case, and to just make sure that you're really thinking about it. So uh, and also, you don't always have to do things in threes. I know a lot of candidates like doing things in threes. Look, Jeremy did four and it was great. So you don't have to do things in threes. I know people love thinking like, yeah, all things in consulting have to be in threes. But yeah, so as you can see here, it goes from kind of the market, which is a clear, obviously you want to explore that. And then, so it sort of goes external, internal, appealing target, and on finances, operational health, which is generally always good to look at. And then the third and the fourth are really great and are tailored to the context, which is a private equity slash acquisition context, which is to say, okay, so on top of the internal factors and the external factors, what other things do we have to look at in this deal? And since it's a PE deal, it's a great example that you say, okay, can you create value, make this company better over time? Does the PE team have expertise? Can we add value to this company? Any other synergies with other companies that the private equity firm owns? And so, yeah, 3 and 4 are great in the context of PE. And I have to say that I think not firms don't expect that you know a ton about private equity, so you don't need to be concerned if you're not as familiar, but just having a sense of like, okay, we're acquiring a firm, what else do we have to think about? Yes, okay. Jeremy, any feedback on your own framework before we move on to the next part?
No, it's like a lot. These private equity cases, there's a lot of stuff that feels important. So I felt like I was delivering it like in a really long-winded way, but I think I did pretty well with it. The thing I would say is some of it I felt I could have customized better to the industry. I felt like I was talking a lot. Um, yeah, someone asked about the typical delivery time. Yeah, like 2 to 3 minutes is typically good here. I felt like I might have been going a little over that. The other thing that I would add, just as we were talking about before, this works well for a private equity case. If this was a, basically, if it was like another sports gear company considering acquiring a different sports gear company, you can see how that would change the framework, right? So you wouldn't necessarily have like the same categories because the company probably wouldn't be able looking to exit, but you'd be more thinking about it from a strategic standpoint, like why are they acquiring it in the first place, if they're already in that market. So you can see how these change like based on small things in the prompt.
Yeah, great. I wouldn't say this is more of a round 2 level case. I think this could be round 1, but uh, yeah.
Yeah, for
Let
sure. I think either one.
yeah, someone asked. Okay, iPad home. Okay, now let's go into so picking up back my interviewer hat. Jeremy asked about the market, so let's go into the market. So yes, Jeremy, I think it's fantastic. Let's go into looking at a market overview just to check it out there. Yes, let's start by estimating the size of the US sports apparel market.
Okay. So just to clarify that back, you want me to size the size of the US sports apparel market. What do we mean by sports apparel here? When I think of sports apparel, I think it can mean many things. Is there a specific demographic or type of apparel we're referring to?
Yeah, so we are focusing on revenue that is from sports uniforms, and let's focus mainly for amateur players. So this is non-professional sports players, people who kind of play for fun on like,
Uh,
think of it as like an informal, like a mini league, if you think
like
about your
intramural kind of
exactly.
or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And also for secondary school organized sport, that's you can focus on that since that's what sport apparel division focuses on.
Okay. And this is like high schools,
Yeah.
middle schools too, or in elementary or just high?
Um, you can do middle and high. Sure.
Okay. Okay. All right, awesome. So it sounds like we're focusing on these amateur sports, like intramural sports that you'd play like a rec league kind of after work or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I take a minute to just think through how I'm planning on approaching this one?
No, go for it.
Okay, I think I have an approach for it. So I'm going to take a separate approach for the intramural and for the secondary school folks. So
Sure.
and then I'm going to add them together at the end to get a total number of jerseys. And we're just talking about jerseys here, it seems like, or
That's
like
right.
full apparel set. So I'm going to say just like a jersey.
Sure.
Okay. So what I'm going to do for intramural athletes here is take basically the number of people who I think are eligible to play these types of sports. So I'll take an age range of folks. I'll multiply that by a percentage that I'm going to estimate that play an intramural sport as a young adult. And then I'm going to estimate essentially how much they pay for a jersey, or not how much they pay. I'm first going to do the quantity. So I'll estimate a replacement rate, which is essentially how often they replace the jersey they're wearing. And then I'll at the end have a price for the jerseys to get a total market size for these intramural athletes. Um, I'm going to do something similar for the secondary school students, but do you mind if I just start with intramural here and get a size for that first?
No, go for it.
Okay, so let me know if any of these assumptions don't make sense to you or if they feel like they're off track. So I think it's safe to say that the most likely people playing these sports are essentially between like when they graduate college and then when they turn 35, let's say. So like 20 to 35, that's where most of these intramural athletes are. Is that right? Does that
Yeah.
sound right?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's essentially 15 years of somebody's life. And so I know that if we assume a population of 320 million people in the US and everyone is between 0 and 80, that there are 4 million people at each sort of age, at each age at a given time. And so that puts a total of 60 million people in that target age group, meaning that these are the most likely people to play these intramural sports. Uh, I would estimate that it's majority of people are not playing them though. It's probably somewhere between like 10 and 20% that are, after work they're going to play soccer or softball. And so I'm going to say 20% of people play in these, just knowing from my own personal experience. I have some friends who played this stuff when I was in, my earlier 20s, and they would go to Central Park or somewhere in Boston to play a sport, and they would have a jersey they would put on. So if 20% of those 60 million play something, that makes it 12 million people that play an intramural sport. And I'm going to assume that all of those people play exactly one sport and one sport only, just to not complicate things, although I'm aware some might play more than one. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, so 12 million people playing. Uh, I'm going to just pause for a second to see if there's anything that I'm missing. So I have number of people in the age group, percent playing. Now I want to estimate the replacement rate. So essentially, do they replace this every year or not? And I think most people probably get a new jersey, I would say every 2 years. They might play on a team that's consistent and they don't need a new one every year. So I'm going to say 6 million jerseys are bought from these intramural athletes per year in the US. So with regards to students, you said we're doing middle school and high school. So when I went to school, that comprised 7 grade years. And as I said, roughly 4 million people in each age group. So that means that there are 28 million people in the US that are in middle or high school at a given time. I think sports are more prevalent in grade school than they are in intramural and intramural level. And I think based on my experience, roughly 40% of people or of students play a sport. That's based on when I was in school. A lot of people played either soccer or tennis or basketball. And again, I'm going to make the assumption here that people play only one, even though I know that's not totally true, just to
Hmm.
simplify down here. So if 28 million people, 40% play a sport, that I'm just doing that math out on my paper real quick. That gives me 11.2 million people who actually play a sport in that age group. And I think it's safe to assume as well here. I remember at least with like the football team, I don't think they were getting new jerseys every year. I was on the tennis team and I think we did get new shirts every year, but I think on average it's probably every two that people are getting new jerseys.
Hmm.
So I'll take that 11.2. Is it okay if I round it to 11?
Yeah, go for it.
And awesome. And I'll divide it by two, and that will give me 5.5 million jerseys that are bought every year, taking into account the replacement rate. So if I total the 6 million from the intramural and the 5.5 million from the secondary, I get 11.5 million jerseys, and I'm going to round that to 12 if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So 12 million jerseys total. In terms of pricing, I think there's a wide range here. I think that some jerseys might be priced as little as maybe $15 and others for maybe higher end could be 80 plus. Would it be okay if I assume something in the middle at around $40 per jersey?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll take that 12 million and I'm going to multiply it by 40, and that's going to give me $480 million as a market size for sports apparel in just these two parts of the market within the US. And in terms of if this number makes sense, I think it does. I was not expecting to see a number that was many, many, many billion, just given we're only in a very small like couple segments of the market here. And I also wasn't expecting to see something below like 20 million because I think it is a significant market. So from a sense check standpoint, this does check out. It's not as large as I would be hopeful to see as a private equity investor. It depends on the size of the fund, I think. If it's a huge fund, this sort of market wouldn't get me super excited. But if it's a very small fund, I think it would be more exciting. So I'd want to understand that, but I also would want to understand if this market is actually growing or shrinking, to understand if it's going in a good direction or not.
Yeah, no, that's a great estimate. I think it's totally reasonable. So if we want to look a little bit into the market here, how might we break it down further to better understand the different components of
Yeah,
it?
yeah, do you mind if I take like 10 seconds to map out that answer?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So I think there are a few different ways we can break this market down to understand it better. Number one is we could break it down geographically. So it's possible that most of the jerseys are being bought in certain areas of the country and that it's worth investing, worth understanding if there are certain areas that are driving this market,
Mhm.
and where we play, where the target company plays. We could also
Yeah.
break it down by gender and understand if it's better to target um, certain gender that are buying majority of these.
Hmm.
We could also do it by sport, understand what sport or hobby, what are the exact things, not hobby, but game maybe. Maybe a lot of the jerseys are going towards like cornhole or like spike ball. Like we don't know where these, especially with the intramural sports. Um those are the big three. I think we could also break down by socioeconomic status and see if most of them are being sold to a certain like socioeconomic demographic in the US. But the ones that make the most sense, I think, are geography and sports. Okay.
Okay. The team has taken some time to put together the data on market growth as well as the relative sizes per sport. As you mentioned, that's one area we can double click into. What do you observe about the market and sports gear based on this information? Uh,
Gotcha. Do you mind if I just take 5 seconds to orient to the chart here?
sure, sure. And
Okay.
also for context, I should mention that sports gear's strongest businesses are in baseball and football, and that accounts for about 75% of their revenue.
Got it. Okay. That's great to know. Okay. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is the total, what I'm seeing on the x-axis is market size by sport. So if we add these bars all together, we should get the total market size. But what we've done here is disaggregate the total into the sports. And then on the bottom, we have 5-year projected CAGR. Uh, can you just clarify what CAGR means?
Yeah, it's the compound annual growth rate. So basically, it's like you take let's say for football, it's 150 today, multiplied, it's going to grow by 1% next year, and then another 1%, and then another percent over the next 5 years.
Got it. Okay. No, it makes sense. So I'm going to break this down into two components. So with regards to the size, what I'm noticing is that football and baseball are the biggest. Basketball and soccer play in the middle, and then the other four are relatively small compared to the first four that I mentioned. And I noticed that football and baseball are the ones that we play
Mhm.
in today, and that make up, well, we play in a couple, but these make up most of our revenue. So we play in the biggest segments, which is a good sign to me overall, given that we have more market to potentially capture. But a downside is that I noticed the growth rates are actually pretty weak. I actually noticed for the first five different sports here, the growth rates are at highest 2%, and some of them are a couple are even negative. So it's pretty stagnant overall in the bigger categories. And interestingly enough, the categories that are growing the most are the smallest ones. So I think what I would take away from this is I'd want to understand where the remaining 25% of the client's revenue is coming from. Because if it's coming from soccer or basketball, that wouldn't be as great as if it's coming from, let's say, volleyball or cheerleading or lacrosse, where there's more growth, even though the market size today is not so great.
Yeah, great observation.
So that
Okay,
next, yeah, basically the next piece of analysis I would do is understanding where the remaining revenues is coming from.
great. Okay, so uh, break for commentary. So Jeremy did a great job of clearing the slide. Basically explaining what he saw on the graph. Kind of, and this is best practice just to make sure that you understand it correctly. Just say, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and he said, oh, here's all the market sizes by each sport, and then he asked a clarifying question about the compound annual growth rate. You can ask questions if there's something in the chart you're not familiar with, something like CAGR. The interviewer will happily explain it to you. And then you go with observations. And so he did a really good job with the observation that we are in football and baseball, which are the biggest, but they are not growing the fastest. But some of the smaller sports are growing faster, but there's like a trade-off there. That's exactly the insight we'd like to have. Okay, and now let's go. Let's wrap up. So
Okay.
Jeremy, I'm going to ask Jeremy for his conclusion here. Okay, so Jeremy, now you know you did a bit of analysis. And you've seen how some of the growth rates are, what would you conclude? What would be your overall recommendation?
Okay. Do you mind if I take just a moment to come up with that?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So what I would recommend is for the private equity firm to not invest in the target. There are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is that we actually don't have any real information about the internal operations of this target and their own financial health and if they're profitable. And I think those things are too important to overlook and to not have at the time of making a decision. Number two is that the market they play in is actually not as big as I think this private equity firm would probably hope for, given we don't know much about their size. So even if we took all the share in this market that the target plays in, it probably wouldn't hit the huge returns that the fund might be looking for. Um, the third reason is that they don't play in the categories that are growing, or we don't know if they play in the categories that are growing the fastest. So the categories they play in are relatively stagnant. And so I'm not confident they can rely on tailwinds from the market itself to get them the growth that they're looking for private equity type returns. The risks of not doing an investment like this are that they might be passing up a great deal. Maybe this client is operating at an incredibly high level. They're on track to take over this market, and maybe they already have expansion plans to go to all the other sub verticals, and we might be missing missing out on that just because we haven't done enough diligence. In terms of the next step, I can't say for sure that they shouldn't do this. At least I can just say at the current moment, I wouldn't advise it. But what I would say next is that they should go and do a full diligence on this company and see if it's the type of company they want in their portfolio or not. And then they can make a much better decision.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy.
Do you have any feedback on or reflections on the recommendation there?
Uh, yeah, so I think, and everybody, feel free to chime in on how what a great job Jeremy did.
Or if I
Jeremy,
didn't, you can say I'm open to feedback. So I'd love to hear if you thought there's anything that I didn't do so well.
no, I think with such a short case and so I think for everyone's learning here, I think when you're learning how to case, I think a lot of people are anchored on what the right and the wrong answer is. In this case, given this information, there is no right or wrong answer. Both answers are actually fine. So to Jeremy said, don't invest. But if you said invest, but you have a kind of a rationale as to why, and it's kind of logical, like that's also okay. But the data so far would suggest that it's not a very attractive market. But we didn't do a whole in-depth analysis as Jeremy pointed out. So actually we don't know. So as long as your answer is logical, that's okay. Yeah, Jeremy, do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I actually didn't like, I was actually thinking a lot of the time, like, I wasn't like, I have seen the case before, admittedly, but I treated it as like a fresh case. So with the recommendation, I was actually thinking about what I would recommend, and most of the recommendations are in like the affirmative that we see on casing because it's just like easier, and most of the time the company should do the thing.
Yeah.
But this time, I actually don't think that we have enough information for them to do it. So I gave like what I would recommend in an interview.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he said don't invest, and then he made some really good points drawing in on the graph that we saw, and then also his own market sizing. So in your conclusion, you want to make sure to bring in the bits of information from the different parts of the case. This case was only like two parts essentially, the market sizing and then the graph, right? But if there are more
Hmm.
parts, try and pull them all in your synthesis. And because that's exactly what your recommendation should be, a comprehensive look at everything you and analyze in a holistic way. And then yeah, the risk, uh I think he could have elaborated more, and then you can kind of say more creative things. Um, and then next steps, full diligence. Also, it's a good one. I think again in this case it's private equity, so the firms are not expecting somebody interviewing for the analyst level to know this, but you could easily say next steps. Oh yeah, I would like to just look more in depth into the company financials and all the operational stuff, all the stuff that Jeremy mentioned in the framework. And so you don't have to use kind of PE verbiage as so to
Hmm.
speak, but just make the same points. And so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you everyone for being here. Really, thank you. I hope you enjoy if it's the weekend coming up for you or if it's already the weekend wherever you are. Hope it's a good one.
Yeah. Thanks all.
Alrighty. See ya.